that's something the detectives and the prosecutor would have to figure out. Detective, how would
You get a confession out of somebody.
how would you coerce a confession?
Well, this would be a good example of high-risk lifestyles. Most murders, most of y'all, maybe, are probably safe. You'll probably never be a victim of homicide. But if you cheat on your wife, cheat on your husband, you smoke dope, you're out after midnight, the chances of you getting whacked in this town significantly went up. So, but on something like this, whoever the killer would be, in the interview room, I would try to relate to him on 3 principles. That we all want to be loved, we all want to be respected, and we all want to be able to protect the ones that love and respect us. So the differences between ourselves and that hijacker or that killer in this kind of rage are the choices that we make in life to either protect those 3 things or achieve those 3 things.
You have to make sure, obviously, you get the right person, too. You investigate, because there's obviously 2 choices here. It's the husband or it's the bartender. And if you pick the wrong person, that screws up your entire case. How do you have to make sure you get the right person?
You always got to make sure that you don't formulate a suspect and try to make the evidence fit the suspect. The evidence should always lead you to the suspect. And in this case, if it was the baseball bat, hopefully the DNA, fingerprints, blood, things like that would help us lead us to the right suspect.
Well, you'd have the baseball bat, but obviously you'd have to figure out who used the baseball bat. The husband could have used it. It's obvious that the bartender was showing some emotion with the baseball bat. What if the husband picked up the baseball bat and then left it behind?
True, and it's in a bar, and a lot of people might have had access to that. There's all kinds of things that happen in the bar, and that's why we would interview all kinds of folks. We would interview everybody, the barmaid, obviously the wife, and certainly the husband, and we would also do what we call a psychological autopsy on the victim. We would break down the victim's life. And that's the cool part about our job is we all got that weird stuff going on, either that weird family member or ourselves. And so when you stop breathing in this world, someone like me or my partner who's out there, we're going to come and investigate and shake out all that weird stuff. We will find out stuff about you that your own family won't even know about.
What kind of role do you play in the district attorney's office while he's investigating this?
Well, I am in the major offenders division, so I actually work hand in hand with Brian and people like him in that we give advice during the investigation. We actually, they're out of the scene and they're calling us for the legal part of their investigation. We write warrants. We give them advice about, what they can and cannot do, and maybe give them direction because we're not there and we're just hearing what they're telling us, and we may think of something that they didn't think of because they were there.
Well, it could have been, obviously, Sarah, since we saw it, we don't think it was her, but she could have been the one that murdered.
Yeah, I think that's the fun part about this play is that I thunk it was the husband the whole time. I was going upon that premise. But then when the lights go out and the bartender was a little emotional and a little violent, then I kind of swung over to her. So I think that's the big thing, is to not have a preconceived notion of who you think it is before you hear everything.
What if nobody wanted to talk to you? What if everybody was concerned about their own improvement?
That doesn't happen. That
All the time. What if none of them wanted to talk?
What if they call their lawyer first and then they'll talk?
Well, she made a mistake by picking up the bat, that's for sure.
Yeah, she was a little.
Or she confused things by picking up the bat.
That's right.
How would you interrogate the husband and the wife because they can't testify against each other?
That's what's called spousal privilege.
Right.
Well, they can testify, they can waive that. One can waive it against the other, but, you know, at the beginning, you go in there with the premise that you're not a suspect, we just want to know what's happening, we just want to know, we want information, we want the truth, then, you know, a lot of people do talk. You don't treat them like suspects from the very beginning. You just treat them like, because they may not be a suspect.
The stuff you see on TV, the yelling and the screaming, most of the people that we deal with, that's not going to work. They've been yelled at and screamed at their whole life, and look at the choices that they've made. But in this particular case, I would probably start off with just trying to get a timeline of where people were. And even though body language and things like that is kind of a pseudoscience, I would listen to what they're saying and then try to verify timelines. And it might be a series of 2 or 3 different interviews if they don't lawyer up.
Well, and that's what I was going to say. This, you know, right now we're talking about these discussions about with the police, but you know that everybody has a 4th Amendment right and a 5th Amendment right, 6th Amendment right. It essentially says they don't have to talk to an investigator, and they have a right to have you know, an attorney represent them. And in most cases, though, that I've seen in my career, almost everybody talks, you know, and so it's difficult. Now, my job.
The ones that aren't experienced are the ones that talk.
Yeah, right. First time in, sure.
I'm not sure if any of these people would talk in this situation. And if
I don't know.
it makes it a problem for you, doesn't it?
Human nature is to talk. People like to talk, you know, people like to
Eventually talk. They may not talk right away, but they can't resist telling somebody else what happened to them.
perhaps, or just comes out little by little in little kind of secret ways, or
Well, this is an emotional crime. You got to look at when crimes happen. You got to break them down into 2 things. Is this an emotional crime or a non-emotional crime? Looking at the crime scene, the violence that would probably take place with a baseball bat, no money being taken if it wasn't staged, and money not taken from the bar. It's an emotional crime scene. So at an emotional scene like that, now you can tap into the emotional side of that person, to whoever you're talking to, that side of love and betrayal.
Demond, if you're covering this for the station, are you going to go talk to all these people?
I'm pretty confident I can get someone to talk. If not any of these folks, someone around the area. You know, one of my main goals when I go to a scene is to, one, try to be the first one there, so I can get a scan of everyone who's around the area to see who may be potentially involved. And I think from a reporter perspective, a crime reporter perspective, it's all about approach. We cover so many of situations like this. It's kind of one of those joking things many of my photographers have. Same script, different cast. When we go to different crime scenes, same kind of situation, only different players. And you know, for me, I would personally, directly try to find out who was in the bar at the time. If they're not talking to the investigators, who usually have us a distance away, I'm going to scan the area and talk to anyone who may have been at the bar, who's familiar with the bar. You know, Sarah, I thought it could have been her just because she's an abused woman, emotionally abused. She has self-esteem issues. In terms of like self-esteem issues, come on, from the beginning. He drove her to drinking in the beginning. And when she left him, she went with her husband the first night, you know what I mean? So just trying to find out a little bit about the characters. One of the things I try to do when we're covering the story, that last song says all entertainment until it happens to you. We don't look at it like that because I recognize that these are individuals who have a story, and I try to personalize it a little bit. So my main goal would try to be to find out who these folks are, personalize it a little bit so that the viewers can have a little perspective as to what this love triangle is all about. Love triangle terms make sensational TV, unfortunately, but we've got to recognize that these are individuals, and I got to try to make the viewers care about them. So definitely want to find out who they are, what the situations may be that led up to this murder, and try to help these guys get some answers. You know, I find out a lot of times more of the suspects or people who are working the story more inclined to talk to us because We're there first, we get to know who the players are, we can knock on doors, not anymore. I recently had a gun pulled on me, knock on a suspect's door. So knock on doors and try to talk to some folks, and I don't know if from our stories or what you hear people say in our stories, if that helps you in terms of your investigations at all, but that's kind of how I approach a situation like this.
How does alcohol, Connie, play a role in this case? There's obviously a lot of alcohol consumption here. So people may be more willing to talk earlier than later. But how does it play a role in the trial? What kind of offenses can have, if any, the alcohol?
Well, alcohol complicates things, and in terms of culpability for the person who did it, of course, they're going to say, well, I wouldn't have done it, but for the alcohol. Alcohol for the dead person is also problematical because it makes them, then they can't speak for themselves anymore, and so then the person who's charged can say, well, they attacked me, and the person has alcohol or drugs in their blood. That makes things more problematic for the state.
It makes them less sympathetic.
Correct. So alcohol, on most of these crimes,
And like a dead person can't talk either, obviously, so the dead person can't defend himself.
right. And so really the suspect or the defendant can pretty much say anything, and we, the state, have to kind of disprove what the defendant said. I think there was a recent case, the Stiletto case, just recently, where the victim in that case, he was truly a victim. His alcohol content was very high, and I think there was a lot of testimony in that trial that talked about he was an alcoholic. He had drinking issues, and that was part of her defense, was that he was attacking me. I was just merely defending myself. And I think by the verdict that was soundly,
They disagree.
yes.
The jury disagreed.
But that's very problematic.
Would it be problematical if, for example, the deceased had fingerprints on the bathroom?
Spoken like a true defense attorney.
Or they were smart enough to put his prints on the bathroom?
Could be, I find,
Once his prints appear on the bath, that bath doesn't really become a murder weapon anymore.
Well, it would be obvious, if he owns the bar, and it's a bat that you would assume might be kept, and you did your interviews, and they said, oh yeah, he keeps a bat behind the bar, well sure, his fingerprints would be on that bat sometime. The key would be to look for any kind of DNA or prints that doesn't belong there. So if Sarah's or her husband's, Michael's, prints are on there, well, they shouldn't be on the back, but it would be, you would have to assume that the barmaid, the barkeep, and Tom would have their prints on that back.
Which makes it difficult to eliminate either Sarah or the owner of the bar. Not Sarah, the narrator or the owner of the bar. If their both prints are here on the back, it's pretty hard to pick which one did it, unless somebody's talking.
the owner of the bar is dead.
Well, in terms of who attacked you,
Oh, if she claims self-defense.
obviously she would.
Yeah, the problem is that, no, it's a difficult case because there's multiple people that have motive, and and everybody has the opportunity. So you have, those are two things that you have to look at first. Was there an opportunity to commit this crime? And then there's always, is there a reason for this person to commit the crime? And so has so many layers here that would also be a great case for me.
I thought at first it was probably the husband, Sarah's husband. That's what I suspected was going to do this. And eventually, it turned to my wife and saying, nothing's happened here yet, I missed something. And so I thought that he was going to be the one, and I thought it was going to be a gunshot, but nobody heard anything. And
I thought it was the barkeep, the way she was swinging that bat, and his eyes. And she couldn't resist his eyes, right?
that she would see how much he loved her, that he loved her enough to kill for her, and that would cement their relationship forever. But then the female bartender, she was a little.
You know, another thing that you have to look at is what are their, what actions or activities occur after the event. You know, are they back together? Are they, what strange events may have happened in regards to the husband and the wife? How did their relationship change? And that could very well be, inconsistent with somebody that had committed a murder. There are things like that that you look at.
And that's one of the reasons why, from a reporter perspective, it'll be so important for us to find out, after we find out who the victim is, to find out who's closest affiliated with them, who works in the bar, so we can find out what some of those relationships were, whether or not anyone had any gripes against him, because we probably wouldn't find out about Sarah and her husband being a player until after the fact. I mean, we'll cover this story for days, and unless we get some type of tip from an investigator or someone inside the bar who knew these individuals and knew about this triangle, we'd probably just be working on what we have is that the bar owner was dead, and we'd just be working the sources inside the bar closely connected to him to find out what we can uncover next. Often, when we're covering murder or homicide investigations, you don't find out all of these unique details until way down the line.
And that's what we're hoping.
That's why we have the sources who help us out and get us all that information.
There's a strategy dealing with these guys right here. Like on a case like this, the strategy would be to actually reveal that no money was taken, and probably that this was somebody that knew the victim, because it would generate conversation, and then we like to read the comment section after you guys run a story, and we get good stuff from that too. So, but we're really using the media, and they use us as well, so, yes, sometimes it's a willing partnership, sometimes we, both have our ends, but it's a very valuable tool, not just in this type of case, but in a lot of other cases. So you guys will.
Let's assume everybody would want to talk, which is risky if you give it to the wrong person, you blow your own face.
I don't think I would give immunity to anybody in this particular situation. And that's really, we don't give immunity very often, to be quite honest. And that's something that the DA has to make that decision. And I'm certainly not the DA. But, yeah.
Some of these crimes take years and years to resolve. And this seems like it would be one of those type of cases that might take some time to resolve, depending on whether or not anybody speaks.
Hang on, if they ask for
If they'll ask for a lawyer, this case will take years, not yet.
Yeah.
That would be prosecuted, correct? Because there's too many potential defendants in this case, people that are possible suspects.
Yeah, motive and opportunity. Which one?
Would you offer a deal, or would you take it to trial?
Well, it just sort of depends. I mean, let's say we charge, we're not going to just charge someone just because. We charge them because we have evidence. And then, depending upon lots and lots of different factors, there are, obviously, we do plea bargain, but always in the interest of justice. So, let's say it is the husband who did it, and we can prove that, and his backstory is that he was so distraught and they had been married. That in the olden days there used to be a law called the paramour law, and if a husband caught his wife cheating, now this was way a long time ago, like in the late 1800s, but if the husband caught the wife cheating and he killed the lover, then the fact that she was cheating with this guy, that's not so bad. And they get a jury charge and they get a not guilty. They can be acquitted based Now, the law did actually say that he had to catch him in the act.
It only went one way too, right?
What do you mean?
It means if the wife caught the husband.
No, it only went one way. It's the husband catching the wife. Back then, but yeah, there used to be a paramour law in Texas to where if the husband caught the wife cheating and he killed the lover, that was a not guilty. And the jury could actually find not guilty. Now, that did change about in the 70s, where that law was repealed, and so you can't do that. You can't do that now. It's not the case.
When you have a long case, let's say you have one that's delayed, because you can't put it together, okay? There's a lot of crime that you've got only so many people in your office. How much time can you spend?
You have a court case unit, right?
Well, we do have a cold case unit, but that's when the case has to be 3 to 5 years, and all the investigative leads have to be exhausted before we can turn it over to them. So my partner and I, we have cases that are on our shelf that the ones that we remember most are when the victims call. And so there are plenty of people that have cases 5, 6, 10 years old, and usually on the anniversary of their loved one's death is when I get the phone calls, or once every couple of months. And so, not that you would remember this, but it's important that the victims' families hold us accountable. And it's just as important that the police department responds to their concerns, whether we're able to do something with it or not. But there are some families that have certainly held me accountable, and I've had some real knockdown, screaming matches sometimes with some of them, and to this day, after solving their daughter's case, he's somebody that I'm very close with.
Does the media put any pressure on you?
Does what?
Do you put any pressure on the police department if they're not solving a murder?
We do initially, and as we're doing follow-ups, when we get calls from victims' families as well, we'll make some calls, but, I think the chief's putting a lot of pressure to make sure that some of these cases are followed up on, especially now.
I tried a case last year that was over 20 years old, but it was, just cold case, took the evidence, took it out of the box, re-examined it with the new science, and as a result, they were able to go back and re-interview people and the case, and it resulted in conviction.
But you're right, time, I mean, there's only so many of these guys go around. And we have a lot of cases at the DA's office that have been brought to us that are cold cases. And we, in my unit, in my division, we do try to work on those. We actually just solved one, an old Pasadena case, a horrible, horrible double murder from the 70s, and we just solved it.
Why did this case reopen? Did somebody talk, or?
It was a Pasadena cold case guy, just, he had been around for a long time. He remembered when it happened. And actually, I had looked at that case a few years ago. Horrible case involving a mother and her son. And the cold case officer went to TDC and spoke to the suspect and obtained a confession. So we just filed that capital murder just recently, and that is now pending. I'm not going to tell you the name of it, but it was really a proud moment in terms of solving that. And I worked hand in hand with that officer and told him, the law as it stands and what he can do and what he didn't. But he's the one who went and obtained that confession. And so we have now filed it from the 70s. I think it was, I want to say 79.
We're really blessed in our police DA relationship that we have, because before we get a warrant, before we get a search warrant, we always are consulting with special crimes. Even our officers out on the street, the uniformed officers, 24/7 access to the district attorney's office. You leave Harris County And it's the police officers themselves, the detectives drawing up their own warrants and presenting them in front of a judge or magistrate. And the first time the DA sees the case is the person's already been arrested. And that sometimes can lead to bad case law because cases being overturned or thrown out. And we're pretty good in Harris County, I think, because we have a lot of checks and balances of district attorneys, and I always want a great defense attorney because they hold us accountable. The better the defense attorney, the better police officer I'm going to be.
And I try to make sure everybody plays fair.
Any questions? Any further questions?
So you don't think it was suicide?
Well, the bat should be on its way to be tested right now.
I've got one quick question. What percentage of the cases are solved?
Last year, I believe last year Houston homicide was somewhere between 83 and 87%. The average big city will be about 58%. In contrast, Chicago, Illinois is 16%. 16%. So,
What do you attribute the differences?
Dumber criminals, right?
Yeah.
I really believe that really the crooks here, the population knows that there's consequences. Our murder rate spiked when we had all the evacuees from New Orleans, and unfortunately, the criminals who came over with those folks came from a broken system, so they didn't understand consequences, that it might be to their advantage sometimes to talk, and so baseline had to be established. Once they were here in Texas and realized that there was consequences for their behavior, they assimilated and are much like our normal Houston crooks, where there's consequences for their actions.
Now, is anyone here from New Orleans?
Sorry.
New Orleans.
Well, I left a long time ago to get away from them. I was really disappointed when I heard they were coming here.
New Orleans criminal justice system is third world country, that, it's best level, so.
It's completely different. It's Napoleonic codes, and just completely different from what we do really everywhere else in the United States.
But I gotta say, these Houston guys, they do a great job. Now, remember, there's a lot of other county agencies that work homicides, like Harris County Sheriff's Department, so Brian is just with the Houston Police Department, but they do a great job, and I'm telling you, it ain't easy to start with a dead body and then have to work backwards. When I get these phone calls in the middle of the night, I realize how difficult it is and all the different things you have to do at the same time, and with someone like Joel grading your paper, 2 years down the line. Right, the first time, and it ain't that easy, let me tell you. It's easy in hindsight to sit in a jury box or in my office and say, well, you should have done this, you should have done that. But you try doing it from the ground up, it's not easy at all. So you gotta give these guys credit.
Wouldn't DNA evidence be real important in that case?
Oh, yeah.
We haven't talked about that.
Well,
If there is DNA evidence.
we did because the bat,
The bat, it's splattered off the bat onto whoever the killer was.
yeah, but we know who died. The question
Yeah,
is,
we know who died, exactly.
The blood's going to be the victims. With the DNA you want is from the blood in their hand on the hand.
and that could have been multiple people.
Right?
That a similar follow-up question. On the CSI type science stuff, of the 83% that are solved, how much of that is using advanced science now?
It's hard to say.
It's not like
Versus
CSI.
aggressive interrogation.
You know what? It's not like CSI at all. Sometimes we wait 3 months to 2 years for results on tests. It takes a long time. So most of the time, the science supports what we've already achieved in meeting that probable cause threshold for the arrest. So a lot of times we'll get the confession, and then lo and behold, the DNA and the science will just because somebody confesses to us, we don't charge people solely based on a confession. It has to be corroborated by the physical evidence.
And sometimes, most of the time, there ain't no DNA or fingerprints or anything like that, and you have to rely on witness testimony. I mean, we would love for it to be like CSI, where somebody touches somebody and you got DNA, or you can pinpoint a fly's eye, you know, for 10 miles, or, yeah. But most of the time, it's just not there, and you have to make it on witness statements and just in common sense and putting the pieces together. That's the biggest part, is trying to figure out what really happened out there by talking to witnesses. That's the fascinating part of it, is figuring out the backstory and putting the pieces together and then